joined by the great Mike DeCourcy, who is always with us each Tuesday, and Jay Bilas, the lead analyst for ESPN, of course, has tonight's call on the Michigan State game. Dustin Schutte along as well with us. Jay, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you as always, man.
Well, thank you for having me. And that commercial I just heard that referenced date night with your wife, I want to move to Bloomington because that sounded pretty good. If I take my wife on a date, she considers it a hostage situation. So maybe Bloomington's a more favorable place for us to be.
We'll definitely get you taken care of. Security if you need it. No hostage situation necessary. You've been busy as always. We were talking in the break that you're saying this has actually been one of the greatest years of your broadcasting portion of your career. When you first started out, we were kind of laughing. I was talking to Robbie Hummel the other night. He's doing games all the time, which can kind of wear you down because a lot of studying goes in preparation. I mean, when you get to a degree like you were at, it's kind of already there, and you just keep adding it. But when you're doing that many games in different leagues and whatnot, that's a lot of study, a lot of preparation, and man, that'll wear you down.
Yeah, it's not so much that. I think, at least in my existence, for Robbie, for Mike, for me, for just about anybody, you hope you bring in a baseline foundation of knowledge that you add to in your prep. But the prep for me is the fun part. The only hard part about what we do is travel. And that's the thing that can wear you down is, you're on the road all the time. And, when the TSA personnel at 50 different airports by first name, then you go, there's a problem here. But I went the first 31 days of the season, I traveled 30,000 miles, including going overseas and all that stuff. And I didn't feel 1 ounce of fatigue. Like, I've been healthy and happy. And we were joking during the break, like one of the reasons, like I put down a lot of luggage lately. Like I was on the competition committee for about 9 or 10 years. I don't know what it is, but I finally got off that thing. And now I go to games and I don't feel any responsibility for the rules or how things are done. And man, what a weight lifted that is. Is like, talk about putting luggage down. I'm traveling with carry-ons only to every game. It's been great.
Mike, you carrying the luggage now?
I've always been carrying Jay's luggage. That's how I got into this business. No, Jay is the absolute best at what he does, and I would be curious how you view, Jay, this particular college basketball season. It seems to me to be different than a lot we've had in terms of that absence of significant strength at the top. Is that how you view it?
A little bit. I mean, I think it's much the same in a lot of years where the teams at the top, they've lost a few games like almost every year. I mean, we rarely have years like we did in 2015 where you got a team that was 38-0 going into the Final Four and all that stuff. So we haven't had the Tiger Woods target that's been leading the way the whole year. But Mike, I mean, I know you know this, but I was looking at some of this stuff and listening to people say there's nobody that's any good, that kind of stuff, which has become a convenient narrative. And I was going, well, wait a minute, like football had 3 number 1 teams this year. They had Alabama, Tennessee, and Georgia. We've only had 4, and one of them was our preseason number 1, North Carolina, that stumbled all over the place and hasn't been as good as we expected. But other than that, it's been a rotating number 1 of Purdue, Houston, and Alabama, and that's the way it's going to remain for the rest of the year. So I think the different part of this year is the traditional blue bloods, with the exception of Kansas, have not been what we have come to expect. But this is kind of what a lot of fans said they wanted. They wanted quote unquote parity, which I don't think we have. But the best teams, there's a reason. You could come up with a reason to say, here's why this team will lose in the tournament. And every team has one of those reasons. And some of them are going to lose. Like whether it's Purdue, Houston, Alabama, some of them are going to lose in the Sweet 16, maybe even the second round, because there's not a ton of separation between an 8 and 9 seed from a power conference and the big shots that are at the top of the polls. But they're not all going to lose. And one thing I know for sure, somebody's going to win this thing. And when they win it, we're going to look back and talk about how great they were. And so some of this stuff I think is a little bit of hand wringing because we don't feel like we know. But the truth is, I don't think we know in any given year. We just think we do. And maybe I'm wrong here, but I think there's a football mentality that has invaded basketball. That if football played as many games as basketball, they'd have just as many losses as these teams have now. And they just don't. And so we tend to look at it differently, that we analyze every loss, and a win is so elevating, then a loss is so devastating. And the teams that are focused on getting better from now until the end and are worried about their own path instead of how they stack up and all these different metrics are the ones that are likely to do the best when we get to the tournament. And, Mike, I heard you a little bit before you guys went to break. And I think you're right. Like the regular season is to determine whether these teams get in and where they're seated based on their accomplishment. And once the tournament starts, everybody's 0-0, and it's a totally different world than you have during the regular season. And we don't seem to separate that as well as we used to. But that's just part of the current media landscape.
Well, and some of the criticism from the Big Ten the past two NCAA tournaments has been that they haven't made deep runs. They haven't gotten to the Final Four. A lot of those high-ranked teams. And, Mike, you mentioned earlier, and I wanted to get an opinion from both of you on this. You're not expecting, because of the balance and kind of the logjam in the middle of the conference there, we're not expecting 5 Sweet 16 teams from the Big Ten this year. But would it be all that surprising if that were the case based on what seems like the openness of the tournament? I'm not saying there's not good teams or great teams out there, but it just seems like more so this year than maybe in the previous 2 seasons that anybody can beat anybody on any given day. And I know that's the nature of the NCAA tournament. It just feels more that way this season.
Well, I look at, when Jay was talking about 2015, we had Kentucky at 38-0, and I thought that I really felt strongly going into that. I don't bet and all that, but I would have put a significant amount of money on one of 4 teams winning it. I thought those teams had great strength: the Arizona, Duke, Wisconsin, and Kentucky. I had a hard time seeing someone not from that group win it, and I wouldn't be surprised if this were a lot like 2014 when there wasn't a great team after Brandon Ashley got hurt at Arizona. And then we wound up with a surprising Connecticut team and a surprising Kentucky team in the championship game. I wouldn't be surprised if we were in a situation like that. And so how does that happen? Well, teams like Kentucky and teams like Connecticut have to make runs from those deep seed spots. And I think that sort of thing is possible in a season like this. And Houston has been tremendous in a lot of ways, but they've been in reach of some not great teams. Beaten by Temple. Temple was in the game the second time, couldn't finish it off. We've seen them in games with the UCF. They're winning all those games, but maybe it's boredom. I don't know. But even Memphis without Kendrick Davis on Sunday, and that being an obvious big game for Houston, they still weren't great in that one. So even the team that in many ways I think is best built to win in March has given you reason to believe that they might be vulnerable as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, though, the tournament is so different. Like, to the question about the Big Ten, conferences don't go into the tournament. We've lumped them together with that. And I'll give you an example. When I played, I was a sophomore the year that the tournament expanded to 64 teams. And as a player, the tournament seemed overwhelming to us. That, you looked at all these teams and all the results are coming in, and this team lost, this team won, upset here. And it was difficult, a mental challenge to navigate. And my senior year, we were the number 1 overall seed in the tournament. And before we went to our first round game, Coach K brought the team together, and he gave us a bracket, and he says, look at all the good teams on the other side of us in this bracket. And then he kind of said, who cares what happens over there? He goes, only one team is coming out of there. We don't care. And he said, we'll play them Monday night. We don't have to worry about any of that stuff. And then he gave us a different bracket, and it was a 4-team tournament. He called it we were playing in Greensboro. He called it the Greensboro Invitational. He says, all we have to do is win a 4-team tournament. And we had to beat Mississippi Valley State in the first game and then the winner of somebody in Old Dominion. I don't even remember who the other team was. And then we won those 2 games, and then he gave us another 4-team bracket for the regional. We had to play DePaul and then the winner of Navy and somebody else. And we won that. And then we were in a 4-team tournament in the Final Four. And it really made it easy for us our path. This is all we have to do. We have to win this 4-team tournament. And I think the teams that are able to do that, because it's really not about the entire field. You don't have to beat the whole field. You just have to beat the teams that are in your way. And the teams that do that the best are going to have the best opportunity. And that's why I think, even though, Mike, you're right about Houston, there are reasons to say, there's some doubt there. There's doubt about Purdue. There's doubt about Alabama. They don't do this as well. They're young. But once they get into the tournament, they're not dragging their conferences with them. They're not carrying some flag. They just have to beat this team and that team, and then they go home and practice for a few days, and they got to win another 4-team tournament. And like last year at this time, nobody would have given North Carolina a chance to make the Final Four. Nobody. Right. And they did. And they're not going to do it this year, it doesn't seem like. But there are teams that are out there that somebody's going to fall down in their bracket, and they're gonna have an opening, and they're going to get there. But I still think, and maybe I'm wrong here, but I still think there's only about 8 teams, maybe 9, that can win the whole thing. There are a lot of teams that can make the Final Four based on what happens in front of them and how they play. But winning 6 games is a lot different than getting to a Final Four. And I think the universe of teams that can win the whole thing is still a relatively small one.
Jay, before you get out of here, I want to quickly ask you, Trayce Jackson-Davis, about him, his play, especially since the calendar has turned to 2023. He has just been a different player. And it has made a huge difference for Indiana, obviously. But just talk about the level of play he's playing at. There, we've seen there's been a couple stats doing things that has not been done in 25 years, or doing things that's only been done by Shaquille O'Neal and Tim Duncan, things like that, which are not mind-boggling or statistics, but he's really kind of elevated. He's definitely elevated his play.
He's been not great. He's been superior. And for a guy, left-handed, he handles the ball like a grapefruit, and he likes to show you too. He'll handle it with one hand. He's a really good passer, and he's getting double teamed a lot. And his ability to throw out of that double team has been impressive. He doesn't really score outside of 8 feet, but he doesn't have to. He plays his game, and he plays it really well. And he's so explosive. His second, third jump, you see him getting third jump tip dunks. He's been a monster, and it's been impressive to watch. He's been good his whole career. He's had a great career. To score 2,000 points and over 1,000 rebounds in the Big Ten at one place is really hard to do. You don't see it very often. So, hopefully people appreciate it. And he's one of these players that we say we want. We want guys to stick around 4 years and get to know them and all that stuff, get to embrace them. And I think he has been for the most part, but we're still, we still like to talk about Brandon Miller and the freshman and who's going to be the best NBA player instead of who's killing it now. And that guy's killing it now. He's kind of like this more athletic Stetson Bennett in football that, who cares where he's going to be drafted? Look at what he's doing now. He's a phenomenal college basketball player, and I think he's going to be a good NBA player if he gets with the right team. He's going to play a long time in the league. But I've really enjoyed watching it. And, tonight against Michigan State, he's going to be the focal point. He's one of the few players in the country that you have to change your entire game plan defensively to deal with him, or he's going to torch you.